Perfect. Alright folks, welcome back to my lecture series on how to write a script. I'm glad that you guys could all make it today. So today's, class, I'm going to start off doing something a little different. Just a little different. And I guess the core theme of what I want to establish before we can start talking about the script and all that is bring your focus for a second on movie trailers, okay? And I'll explain more why later. But I'm going to play a movie trailer for you on this old VHS that is a really good example of what I'm trying to show you. So here we go.
Today at Blackmail, it cost for almost $60,000 past expense.
What?
My parents are trying to take an active interest in me.
I'm so proud of you. You didn't screw up once. Oh my god. It's a psycho next door.
I didn't mean to scare you, I'm just curious.
Why does he dress like a Bible salesman? Oh, I see. You think you're the only one who's sexually frustrated.
Well then, come on, baby, I'm ready.
There happens to be a lot about me that you don't know, Mr. Spider-Man.
This is for your own good boy.
Yes, sir. Don't give up on me, Dad.
Sometimes there's so much beauty in the world, I feel like I can't take it.
Can you grant definitely worse than me? Smile. You're Mr. Smiley's.
You are so busted.
Alright folks, there you go. That was the iconic, legendary in film circles and communities all around, American Beauty, 1999. American Beauty, directed by Sam Mendes, a classic Sam Mendes picture. Okay, perfect mix of, it said in the trailer, a drama, comedy, you get a little bit of everything in it. Very, very, very well done, very, very good. It brings you in, it intrigues you. Now the movie itself, I could go on and on and on about. But really, it's just the trailer that I wanted to show to you guys. When you're writing a script, something to keep in mind is how good is that script going to be turned into a trailer. Okay? So many people get so overwhelmed when writing a script and so concerned with how the film is going to look, they forget about the trailer. They overlook the trailer. The trailer is something more feasible to think about when you're writing a script. Okay? And so that's just one thing that I've managed to do, or learn, rather, and incorporate into my style of writing a script, is thinking about how will this script look when we turn it into a trailer. Okay? And then we tackle the film later. And not a technique that everybody does. Not a technique everybody does. But it has been done before, and it's part of, part of the reason why I managed to write fairly substantial scripts, is because I choose to focus on the trailer subconsciously rather than the whole picture, the whole movie itself. Okay. So here we go. Back to Talentment. This is Talentment Part 2. My script that me and my crew had worked tirelessly to make. Okay. So where we left off last time was right here. Our opening scene of the homeless man dressing up as different characters, holiday characters, and eventually becoming a angel or a positive influence on the community around him. Okay, and so the opening scene is him finding this letter of Margaret Ellis. Remember, we read the letter together, of the old woman who is begging, is so kind and writes this beautiful, heartfelt letter to the city, praying that they don't go through with their new city development and shut her building down and demolish it. Right? So she's praying, she's hopeful, she says in this letter all kinds of things, Over the years, we've served neighbors and families, nearby streets. I tried my own way to run an honest business, treat people fairly. She just wants to be treated fairly. That's it. And if the building is demolished, I will not be able to begin again anywhere else at this stage of my life. Relocation is not simply inconvenient, it is impossible. Losing a shop would mean losing the means by which I support myself, as well as the place where I feel useful and at home. And so the whole point of this scene, to elaborate a little more from last time, is to establish Margaret Ellis, one of our first characters to be established and introduced and interjected into the script. So she's going to be one of the big people that our homeless main character helps along the way. Okay? So we printed out a new copy of the script. And not all of it made it, so I kind of have to use my computer too and kind of go back and forth. But we're going to guide it all together. So our next scene here, after we have met the homeless man reading the letter, our next scene is, boom, we're inside. We're in an interior of what looks like a convenience store, right? We got fluorescent lights, it's humming. Bzzz. Think of your average mom and pop convenience store, drug store, that kind of deal. Hole in the wall, right? And we're introduced to our second character, the angry teenager, violent teenager. And he is a very troubled teenager, and he's another character who's going to be not only significant later in the script, but he's also going to be another person that our homeless main character helps. First thing I should mention before we jump into our new character here. Our main character's name we've established is George. Okay? So, our new main character's name, he didn't really have a name before. It's now George. So George is the angel in the streets. Okay? And so George is going to help all these people that we introduced today. Alright, so here's the next scene. This angry teenager, remember, he's in the convenience store, hole in the wall, and he's walking in and he grabs an energy drink off the shelf. Kind of walks in with an attitude, right? Don't tell me what to do, right? Like many of us in high school, I think. At least maybe back in the day, I think this new generation is a little more manners oriented. Okay, so he walks in and he grabs an energy drink and he pockets it, right? He puts it in his pocket. And the clerk's watching. There's a clerk nearby who's watching, like, he's already suspicious. He's not very happy. And he goes up to the kid and he says, "You gonna pay for that? You gonna pay for that?" And the teenager says, I was, right? And he slams a crumpled dollar bill onto the counter. And it's not enough. It's not enough money for this energy drink. So the kid already has an attitude. He throws his dollar bill on the table, or on the counter. And the clerk says, "You're short. You don't have enough money. You're short," is what he says. And the teen just kind of sits there and stares. And the clerk says, "I'm going to put it back," and he's about to grab it to put it back. And the teen doesn't move for a second, and the entire store goes still, right? We're going to capture that silence for just a millisecond. And then he slowly grabs it and runs. Sorry, let me find my place. Okay, yeah. So, store goes stealing, and so he's going to steal it, right? So he grabs the drink, and he says, "F you," okay? Throws a bunch of curse words at the clerk. And it's reflexive. It's weaponized. It's, this kid's got a chip on his shoulder. He's pissed, and he's looking for a reason to yell. And to yell profanity at this unsuspecting clerk. And before the clerk can even react, he runs. He's running, he shoves through the door. Maybe he'll knock over a display. We're not sure about that part, but we did write in the script that he's going to knock over a display in this very cantankerous, in this rage, in this fit. And the clerk is running, and finally the clerk kind of registers that he's running after him. He says, "You little bastard," and "Get back here," and the kid runs off down the sidewalk, breathing hard, and he's laughing. And it's not necessarily joy, it's adrenaline. It's adrenaline. Okay, and he doesn't look back. So the clerk gives up after a few steps, cursing under his breath. And the kid disappears around the corner, like we said. So, right? So there's that. And, all right, so that's the next scene. And then after that, we go to our next scene, which is now we finally get to see who Margaret is. And it's the first, right? It's the first time in the movie that we get to see what Margaret looks like, how she acts, just everything, Okay, and so Margaret is kneeling beside her bed. That's where this next scene starts. And she's praying. She's quietly praying by her bedstand. Right by the bed. And then you hear a soft floorboard creak behind her. And Carl enters. Now Carl is also a new character. He's her husband. Obviously he won't be seen too much. But he is part of the dynamic that we have around Margaret. So he's in his late 70s, he's gentle, he's worn, but he's steady. And he's in a plain white shirt and some pajama pants. These guys, they're old, they're about to go to bed. It's nighttime. And Carl walks up and he sees his wife on the floor praying. And, instinctually he's like, she's going through it right now. I gotta support my wife. So he says, "Oh, honey, it'll all work out. You mustn't worry so much." Warm. His voice is very warm, familiar, almost as if it's practiced, because these two have been married a long, long time. Long time. Okay. And she doesn't turn right away, but the camera's on her and she's smiling. When she hears his voice, she smiles. She's tired, but she smiles. And she says, I'm not worrying. You know, like her husband's telling her, don't worry. And she's like, I'm not worrying. And Carl knows her. You know, honey, you've been worrying since 1982. And as he's talking to her, he walks into the bathroom to go brush his teeth, because again, they're going to sleep. And so she's still on the ground, you know, slowly getting up as he's walking in the bathroom, brushing his teeth. And there's just a little bit of silence again, and she's like, you know, I can't leave this alone, Carl. I've put my whole life into this company. And so he's still brushing his teeth, long enough to, you know, he's processing what she just said, and he's figuring out what he wants to say. And so he comes out of the bathroom, still brushing his teeth, and he takes a pause, mouth full of saliva and everything. He says, I know, girl. I know, girl. You know, he's taking her really serious, because he knows she's distressed as hell. She's really holding face here. And then he says, I just want you to know, whatever happens, you still got this old son of a bitch by your side. Right? He's being endearing. He's being a loyal, the way a loyal husband would talk to his wife after so many years. All right, so he resumes brushing casually and goes back to the bathroom, you know. And she laughs. She's laughing. And she shakes her head. She shakes her head, smiling, like, oh, goodness gracious. And that's the end of the scene. That's the end of the scene. Okay? And so what's happening is we're establishing multiple characters right at the beginning of the film, right after the letter and all of that. We're just kind of going consecutively, because all these storylines are going to intertwine, is what's going to happen. They're all going to intertwine, because they all revolve around George, our homeless main character. So, all right, our next scene after that is going to go back to George. And George is dressed up as an Easter bunny this time. And he's sitting by the riverbank. So it's early in the morning. The river is moving very slowly, gray. You know, we're going to have a wide angle. The water is very indifferent. That's the attitude of the water. And there's going to be mist, because this is Oregon, so there's probably going to be mist out there, fog, what will you? And that hangs low over the water. And on a rock near the edge of the river sits George. And he's dressed as an Easter bunny. And the costume is faded and dirty and just looks like, yeah, it just looks like it's been buried in the ground for 3 years. And one of the ears is bent. And the oversized head sits right next to him on the ground. And he's staring into the water, and there's no music, there's no nothing. There's just nothing there, nothing there. This isn't a Hallmark film where we're going to fill all the space with pretty visuals and pretty music and all this, you know. That's just baloney. No. This is going to be a very peaceful but bleak kind of environment. You know, and a lot of that is we're trying to capture this location, which is the coast. It's a very peaceful but kind of bleak-looking, colorless-looking area. And that adds to the beauty, in my opinion. But, so here he is, he's sitting out there, and right next to him is like this little trail. And, you know, a jogger runs past. Guys will run past, slows down a little bit, stares, and just keeps running. You know, kind of unfazed, but also kind of like, oh my gosh, that guy's an East running, but, you know, I'm doing my thing, whatever. Then a father and his little daughter, they walk around on the path, they walk by, and the little girl stops, and she's so excited, she's like, you know, whatever, I don't know what she says. She's like, Daddy, you know, look at this, it's a, you know, Easter bunny, blah, blah, blah. And the father looks confused as hell. The father's like danger mode. Anyway, so the little girl waves, and George, of course, waves back because he's a friendly hero in our story. Anyway, the father pulls the girl and they walk away, hurriedly. They hurriedly walk away, yeah. And the girl keeps looking back, smiling, of course. Anyway, so eventually George gets up, and he gets to the main path, right? So he's walking to this river trail path, and then there's another river trail up on the pavement where there's more people, closer to where the city is. And this is a real life location. That's why I'm explaining it so in depth. But so they walk up. He walks up to the pavement area, and there's people walking by. Blah blah blah. And he's just kind of walking around. He's just hanging out. He's just living. He's living life. He's enjoying what he's got around him. George is a wonderful example of mindfulness. Okay? Mindfulness. George is the embodiment of the amount of mindfulness that I think a lot of us human beings strive for. So, he's walking around, and another homeless guy with bags and everything, carrying like a plastic bag with belongings and stuff. This guy walks by and says, "Hey, George!" Because, the homeless folks know each other. It's very much a community. Having been there myself, I can tell you, it's true. It's kind of a community. It's not necessarily that everybody's friends, but acquaintances. You know someone, and you know their name, you know what they're known for. Whether they're on drugs or whatever the fuck, whatever they're into, right? So that's just the way it is. Anyway, and so he says, "Hey George, you got a cigarette?" Right? And George is still in the bunny suit. He's just happy as hell, and he's smiling, he shakes his head. He says, "No, I don't smoke those. You shouldn't either." And the friend keeps walking back. He turns around and starts to walk away, and he says, "What are you, my fucking mother?" He gets angry at him a little bit. And he keeps walking away, kind of muttering to himself, just and George smiles faintly. He's smiling. And then the friend kind of turns around when he's a little farther away. And he puts his hands around his mouth and he says, "Well, you're right." He says, "But you're right." All right, and so that's kind of showing what I was just telling you about. It's not necessarily that everybody's friends, but we're all in this similar situation where we're all homeless, we're all in the streets, and we just kind of know each other. And, there tends to be a lot of witty conversations back and forth within that little area. Okay, so that's our next scene. So then after that, we go into our next character. So our scene 5 is now we're introduced to the troubled mom. Okay? And we're going to learn later in the story that this mother is struggling with the bills. She's barely keeping up with her 2 kids at home. And to the point where she's been prostituting herself just to pay for the bills of not only the place that they live at, but for food and water and care and everything for her kids. So this is a woman who's really down and out. But of course, right here in the intro, we don't necessarily know any of that. All we kind of see is just this worn out woman. Okay? And she is waiting in line in an exterior place, and it looks like it's a food bank. Okay, so she's in this line at a food bank, basically. And she's in her early 30s, and she's by herself. She's alone, there's no children. Which already, later in the film you'll see, but, I'm hoping some people will pick up on it, that this woman is obviously a mom by the context and by the situational awareness. She's alone. Her children aren't with her, which is a bizarre thing. That's weird, you know? That's going to give you that little red herring that, okay, there's something wrong here. I'm hoping, at least. And I think it will. I think people will be keen enough to understand that. Her hair is tied back tightly, and her clothes are pretty clean, but they're pretty worn out by the sleeves. There's threads coming out and stuff. And the line is inching forward, and the volunteer comes up from the folding table and says, "Hey, how many in your household?" She answers without hesitation, 3. Volunteer looks up. "You didn't bring them?" She said, she says no. No explanation. The volunteer nods. "What do you need today?" Milk, if there's any, bread, anything with protein, blah, blah, blah. The guy sitting there tells her, "Well, the eggs are limited, that's fine." So we just kind of go through a list of food that she needs, and she kind of puts it down. And it's just, again, it's kind of bleak. It's just kind of like quiet, isolating, and it really captures the sense of how alone this poor woman is with her kids. Obviously showing that there is no man in the picture. At least not a healthy one. Right? So there's that. And then I think at some point she goes back to her car and she puts the food in the car. And she kind of puts her head up against this, up against her car. Kind of like this, right? Puts her hand like this. She's not crying necessarily, she's tired. She's stressed out. You can just see it all over her face. She gets in her car and she drives off. Boom. End of the scene. And then boom. So now scene 6. Here's our 6th scene, okay? Alright. Alright, come on folks, pay attention. Shut up. Listen to me. Yeah. Okay, this is scene 6. We got this is the first scene. Excuse me. This is the first scene where we see our main character get beat. All right? And it's very much a powerful scene. Not only because of the age dynamic, but because of a lot of other things going on. Okay? So here we go. I'm gonna start reading it for you, because this is one of the better scenes in the film so far. All right, so we go to it. Boom! It's another day, and we see George, and this time George is dressed up as a leprechaun. Okay, he's wearing his leprechaun suit, his leprechaun hat, green coat. He's got a cheap felt hat. One of my editors, he's like, or one of my writers, he says, "Well, we should put the orange beard." Slightly crooked. I said, "No, that's too cliche. That's too cliche. The outfit in itself is good enough. We don't need necessarily to go all out with the holiday stuff. It's already ridiculous as it is." Okay, so anyway, he's sitting up against this brick wall in a narrow alleyway. Okay, his knees are bent, his hands are resting loosely in his lap. Okay? Right? So loosely. And he's just chilling. He's chilling in this alleyway. He's just relaxing, okay, on the other side of this dumpster. And we'll explain that a little bit later.